My name is Thomas Daniel. I'm a Platinum CSIP located in San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also a Dean of Advanced Avionics College at COPA University. And today we will be talking about activating or not vectors to final. As the first example, we will be flying a very simple approach to Stockton, California. It's an RNAV to runway 29 right, and at present time we are north of Facet intersection at 2400 vectored on the assigned heading of 020. The first thing that we need to do in this situation is to activate appropriate leg in our flight plan. That would be the leg from Oxjeff to Ibdu. We continue flying, and as we are about, I would say, 1.5 miles from the final approach course, here comes the clearance. Cirrus 123 Alpha Bravo, 5 miles from Ibdu, turn left heading 320, maintain 2000 until established, clear for the RNAV 29 right, Stockton. We continue flying, we turn left 320, we join the final approach course, and we finish our approach. Before you even get that clearance, you should calculate what heading you will be turned to. And you should start turning even before the whole readback is completed. In fact, you may want to consider turning as soon as you hear these words, turn left heading, because you can figure out what heading you should be turning to. How are we going to do that? Well, it takes a little bit of understanding of the whole concept of vectors to final. In this example here, we have a final approach course of 095, and you need to know that the ATC has simplifying here an intercept target that is located 3 miles from the final approach course. And the second constraint is that the intercept angle must not exceed 30 degrees. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule, which I'm not going to be talking about right now, but this is the general idea. Taking into account these two things, you can figure out that you will be getting that clearance when you are about 1.5 miles from final approach course. Why is it 1.5 miles? Well, if you are too far away from the final approach course, then either you would be intercepting too close to the final approach fix, or that intercept angle would exceed 30 degrees. When you get at the appropriate distance from final approach course, a clearance comes in. That clearance always have a fixed structure. We often call it PTAC, for position, turn, altitude, and clearance. Position, 5 miles from final approach fix. You don't have to read back that part. Turn right heading 070. Maintain 3000 until established, that's altitude, and then the clearance, cleared for the RNAV runway 9. How do I know it is heading 070? Well, it must be less than 30 degrees from 095, so that would be 065. The closest multiple of 10 would be 070. That gives us 25-degree intercept, which is just perfect. It would be quite unlikely in that situation to get a 15-degree intercept, which would be 080. So I know what heading I will be getting. Keep in mind that 1.5 mile distance works only like that if you are pretty close to the final approach fix. If you are farther away, then geometry indicates that you may be getting that clearance much earlier. Still, the constraints of 30 degree apply, and having intercept the final approach course 3 miles from the final approach fix, these two constraints still apply. Let's go flying. We are now in the airplane. We are flying, we are in the same position as on the previous slide, northeast of Facet, and the first question is, what should we do now? We answered that question before. The first thing that we should do is to activate the leg that is on the final approach fix. Keep in mind, do not activate legs on other segments, not on the final approach course. So we move the cursor to the end of that leg, which is IBDU, hit menu, activate leg, and here it comes. We now have the final approach course on the HSI. When are we going to get our clearance? Well, we answered the question also on the previous slide at about 1.5 miles from the final approach course. And we are currently 2.1 miles, so we have still few seconds to go. What heading are we going to turn? Final approach course is 290, so it is very likely that we will be getting either 310 heading for the intercept or 320 heading for the intercept. So we are now approaching 1.5 miles, and here comes the clearance. Cirrus 123 Alpha Bravo, 5 miles from IBDU, turn left heading 320 as predicted. Maintain 1,800 until established. Clear for the RNAV 290 right Stockton. Notice that we started our turn even as we were reading back the clearance. And indeed, we do not have much time because the CDI starts to slide in and we are about to intercept the final approach course. You should develop what I call a muscle memory, which are the actions that follow each other in sequence. When you get that clearance, your first task is to twist the heading bag to the assigned heading. But immediately after, you should press approach because that arms the intercept, including the intercept of the glide path or glide slope later on. Is this the only option in that situation? It turns out there is another one. There is another functionality in perspective that allows you to accomplish the similar tasks. In this case, we are flying an ILS approach. We are also pretty close to the final approach fix, as you can see on the MFD. However, we have a completely incorrect course on the HSI. This is because we still didn't manage our flight plan. So our first task should be to activate the correct leg as it is before, from this time, however, from SIMS to IBDU. There are other problems that we have in this scenario, and you may not notice that immediately. But if you look at the navigation frequency and the identifier of the localizer, you can see that this is a Modesto localizer, and we are flying an approach to Stockton. How is that even possible? Well, you know that perspective automatically loads the nav radio frequency, but it doesn't do that always. There are very specific, they are not random, but very specific situations where it wouldn't do that. That was the case in this example. So we would have to load the correct frequency in the nav radio. And third thing is we would need to change the HSI from GPS to localizer. So we have three things to do, and we have very little time to accomplish those tasks. Well, we have an option now, procedure, activate vector to final, and as soon as we execute that, we have now the final approach course on the HSI. We have the localizer, we switch to green needles, and we have the correct frequency in the nav radio. So with one action, procedure, activate vectors, we accomplished three things. That may lead you to the conclusion that activate vector to final should always be used in that situation. Well, let's have a closer look at a different scenario. This time, we are flying an approach, it is also an ILS, to Moffett Field in California. There are, the difference between the two approaches is that we have now multiple step-down fixes before the final approach fix. We are in the similar position as before. We are being vectored to intercept somewhere between ZAPEP and AGAPE. So we could try to activate vectors to final. Let's see what happens. Activate vector to final. We now have final approach course. That's really great. However, a B, which is the final approach fix, became the active waypoint. The distance to each step-down fix on the way has disappeared. So we really wouldn't know when we cross them. And we should know that Remember, there is no guarantee that the glide slope will be above step-down fixes. In fact, the aim explicitly says so. It is most common case that the glide slope is above step-down fixes, but we should always monitor. It's difficult to do that when we don't know when to cross each of the step-down fixes. What's the solution? Well, what we have done before. All we need to do in this situation is to activate the correct leg, which would be from ZAPEP to AGAPE. Let's do that, and now you can see that we have the distance to each of the step-down fixes, and we will know when we cross it. The short version of that slide is that you may use activate vector to final, but avoid using that on approaches that have multiple step-down fixes. This is not unique to perspective. The same thing happens on other Garmin navigators, including GTN 650 and GNS 430. In fact, if it is even worse with GNS 430, let's see what happens when we do that on both of these navigators. We will activate vector to final, and on GTN 650, we found ourselves in the same situation as with perspective. We have the fixes before the final approach fix, but no distance, we don't know when we cross them. It is worse with the GNS 430 because those fixes are gone from your flight plan. If ATC now tells you to fly direct to some intermediate fix, you have to reload the approach to make that happen. In summary, activate vector to final is a great feature. It activates a leg that terminates at the final approach fix. For conventional, that would be localizer-based approaches, radio-based approaches, it also reloads the nav frequency. So if for some reason that is an incorrect frequency, that will be fixed. It also switches you to green needles, to localizer. It is faster and simpler than activating leg when it is appropriate to use. And it is not appropriate to use when there are step-down fixes before the final approach fix. Thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful. My name is Thomas Daniel, and I look forward to seeing you at the COPA forums or at the next CPPP.